Listen 8-minute gift article share. Ben Ferencz was a 27-year-old lawyer with no court experience while prosecuting what could be called the largest case in history. In 1947, in the crowded courtroom in Nuremberg, Germany, at 1.70 meters, he nearly disappeared behind the dais. Choose your plan. ArrowRight Mr. Ferencz, Transylvanian-born Jew who came to the United States as an infant, has filed a major lawsuit in U.S. court against 22 officials of the Einsatzgruppen mobile Nazi killing units operating in Eastern Europe. All 22 defendants were convicted. 4 of them were executed. These men would never have been prosecuted had it not been for Mr. Ferencz, a former army investigator who personally recorded millions of using confiscated German war documents and took the case above them. New York City St. John Q. Barrett, professor of law at St. John's University and academic in the Nuremberg trials, said he was humanity's advocate. The scale brutality, sheer innocence of victims, was at center Nazism's annihilating evil. Mr. Ferencz, the last living Nuremberg prosecutor, who devoted most of his life to the cause of international justice, on April 7 in a nursing home in Boynton Beach, Florida. Don confirmed that but did not give a reason. Mr. Ferencz spoke only Yiddish until he went school and was the first in his family to go university. He graduated from Harvard Law School, where he stewed war crimes before joining the army in the middle of World War II. He was sent to an investigative unit that collected evidence of Nazi crimes. After Allied liberators, Mr. Ferencz visited Nazi concentration camps, including Buchenwald, Mauthausen and Dachau. Even today, when close my eyes, I witness a ly vision that will never forget. The crematorium glows with the fire burning flesh, heaps of emaciated corpses piled on top each other, emaciated, waiting to be burned, he once said. I've looked through hell. Mr. Ferencz said that when he left Europe at the end of his military service, he wished never to return to Germany. However, he was soon taken back to serve as a civilian under Brig General Telford Taylor, who replaced U.S. Supreme Court Justice Robert H. Jackson as U.S. Attorney General at Nuremberg. When the trial phase of Mr. Ferencz began, top Nazi officials were put on trial, including Hermann, Göring and Rudolf Hess. Britain, France, and the Soviet Union turned to other post-war concerns, leaving the United States to oversee any subsequent prosecution at Nuremberg. The court, led by Taylor's prosecution, decided the cases of Nazi doctors who performed medical experiments on concentration camp prisoners and industrialists who made use of slave labor. While Mr. Ferencz was supervising investigators at German Foreign Ministry who were examining documents, one of his investigators discovered top-secret reports from Einsatzgruppen detailing towns and cities where squads had passed and horrors they had visited. Barrett described the documents as receipts. One with the label Exhibit 179 was a shipment from Kiev. According to an account in CBS News magazine, 60 Minutes, the document reads, Jews in city are ordered to introduce themselves. About 34,000 people reported, including women and children. After being dissuaded from their clothes and valuables, they were all killed and it took several days. Speaking to London Guardian, Mr. Ferencz recalled that a defendant ordered soldiers, if mother is holding baby at her breast, do not shoot mother, shoot baby because bullet will pass through both. And you will save ammo. Barrett said Taylor was under pressure to finalize court's proceedings as the United States sought to forge a Cold War alliance with country that would later become West Germany. At first, overworked staff seemed unprepared to take on another case, especially one as big as the Einsatzgruppen issue. However, Mr. Ferencz begged his superiors not to ignore such an important crime. I started screaming, said Mr. Ferencz, recalling his conversation with Taylor on 60 Minutes in 2017. Look, I said there is mass here, mass on an unprecedented scale. And he said, can you do this in addition to your other jobs? And of course I said. However, Mr. Ferencz found himself at the head of the case. He selected the defendants according to their rank and education. He could blame thousands, but he was limited by the number of seats in the courtroom. Mr. Ferencz did not call witnesses, plenty of Nazi documents were enough to warrant a conviction. The defense tried to question veracity of reports, claiming that killing units had arrogantly inflated toll and that defendants were merely following orders, but this view was decisively rejected at Nuremberg. Barrett said Mr. Ferencz's statements before the court were noteworthy because he used the new term, genocide. Calmly but forcefully, he argued that defendants acted not according to military imperatives, but according to that supreme perversion of thought, the Nazis' theory of superior race. "Our goal is not revenge, we are not just seeking just revenge," said Mr. Ferencz in his opening speech. "We ask this court to affirm by international criminal action the human right to live in peace and dignity, regardless of race or creed. The case we present is a defense of humanity against the law. The charged willful killing in this case reaches such fantastic proportions and exceeds the limits of such credibility that credibility must be backed by assurances repeated hundreds times," the court said in its decision. As an advocate for rule of law, Mr. Ferencz has for decades carried out the defense of humanity against law. By 1970s, increasingly discouraged by the Vietnam War, he downsized his private law practice in New York to devote himself to the cause of building an infrastructure for international justice. Barrett described it as a one-man operation of conscience, to button up, deceive, force, to write books and establish the permanent legal institution that became the International Criminal Court in The Hague in 1998. Mr. Ferencz claimed that act of war, impetus to crimes against humanity he sought to avoid, was heaviest of all crimes. In ICC's first case against Congolese warlord Thomas Lubanga Diallo in 2011, Mr. Ferencz was invited to deliver the closing address at age of 91. The following year, Lubanga was convicted of war crimes for using child soldiers. Wherever international justice was practiced, Mr. Ferencz seemed to be there somehow. Antonio Cassese, first president of International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia, based in The Hague, recalled Mr. Ferencz's words at Nuremberg hearing in his statements to United Nations, "Death was their tool, life their toy," he said. "If these men are immune, the law has lost its meaning, and one must live in fear." Bela Ferenc was born on March 11, 1920 in the Transylvanian town of Samkuta, which was then Hungary. In the United States, he was called Benjamin Burrell Ferenc. He grew up in Manhattan's Hell's Kitchen, where his father worked as a janitor and painter. He graduated from the City College of New York in 1940 and Harvard Law School in 1943. During war he participated in invasion of Normandy and Battle of Bulge. After the Nuremberg trials, he worked on programs in Europe to return stolen goods and offer compensation to victims of Nazi persecution. Mr. Ferenc later entered private practice with Taylor and became a partner at his New York firm. In 2016, Mr. Ferenc made a financial commitment to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum to establish the Ben Ferenc International Justice Initiative assist those who seek compensation rather than revenge for genocide and other crimes against humanity. Mr. Ferenc's writings include Defining International Aggression, The Search for World Peace, Less Than Slaves, Jewish Forced Labor and the Search for Compensation, which Kirkus Reviews describes as an important dossier on the special role of German big business in Nazi Germany, and An International Criminal Court, A Step Toward World Peace. Mr. Ferenc's wife, the former Gertrude Fried, in 2019. Decades after World War II, Mr. Ferenc has been haunted by what he saw in the camps and the courtroom. 60 Minutes, said the defendants, wouldn't have been heirs had it not been for the war. They were kind people who could quote Goethe, who loved Wagner.